So today I was out here doing some cable management on all this, and I figured I would just make a video on my whole Rockford Fosgate audio setup. Everything I have is speakers, amps, it's all Rockford Fosgate. I've always liked them, and never no problems out of them, especially their amps. So I figured I'd just show what all I've got. I guess I'll just start with the subs. Two P3D4 12s, dual voice core, 4 ohm subs, 2 of them. They are just in a cheap prefab box. I do plan to get it's a sealed box. I think I'm going to try to do something with a ported box next go around. But for now, it's just in a cheap prefab box. Still sound good though. I have them wired to 2 ohms. And right here, Rockford Fosgate 1500 watt monoblock amp, which is powering the subs. Subs are rated at about 600 watts RMS. The amp pushes, according to the burst sheet, probably 1800 watts or so. I can't remember off the top. I'd have to look at the burst sheet, but it's well above 1500 watts even at 2 ohms. And that's the thing about this one, this Fosgate amp, this particular one, the Power series, is you can run it at 1 ohm or 2 ohms, and it's basically the same output wattage. I think it runs a little cooler at 2 ohms, and you still get the base. It's the technology. It's the BDCP. It's kind of what's at the end of the 1500. Anyway, you could check it out. You can look more into it. There's a lot of other videos on about it. But anyway, it is wired to 2 ohms. The wire here is it's a New Concepts OFC 10 gauge wire, just running to each side. Over here, just remote base, goes to a knob up front. This up front, you know, your RCA cables, settings. Over here, what I didn't quite understand is this amp has 4 gauge inputs, which I wanted to run bigger wire. So I ordered these 0 gauge or 1 aught, what's the word? Reducer, I guess, basically to say where you run this 0 gauge wire, reduces it down to a 4 gauge pin that plugs in. I'm not going to take it out and show you, but if you just look, you'll see. One thing to note though is on Amazon, when I got these off Amazon to fit in this amp, I had to trim. If I was to pull this out, I would show you. I just don't feel like pulling it out. But you unscrew this and pull this out, the little piece that actually sticks inside, that screws in, you have to trim it down. Otherwise, just straight out of the bag, it will not fit. So these are kind of cheap. You can buy a full copper one, which eventually I might. They're like 50 bucks. I just use these cheaper ones off of Amazon. I don't even remember how much I paid. I think it was like less than $10 for these, but it works really good. And so speaking of the wire, this is 0 gauge. Now this is welding cable. I got this from timcoindustrial.com. 0 gauge or 1 aught welding cable. This is not CCA. It's full. It is copper cable. It's not OFC or I'm sorry, CC, you know, copper clad aluminum CCA wire. It is full. It is copper wire. And my personal opinion is this welding cable was from here I want to say one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, for this size wire. And it's very flexible, just looking at it. It's not, most welding cable is really hard to work with when it gets thick like this. This stuff from Timco, very, to be as thick as it is, it's very flexible. I do like it. I would certainly recommend it again. But before I get into the wiring, I'm going to come back over here. This is the Fosgate 300 watt 4-channel amp. This is what's running to all of my, just to pan it real quick, you can't quite see it, but I've got 4 Rockford Fosgate mids there, and then down there. So this amp here is powering the mids, 4-channel 300 watt. This is just the Prime series amp, whereas this is the Power series amp. This is a cheaper Prime series. Nothing wrong with it. I had a 1200 watt Prime series Fosgate amp that pushed these. It pushed them okay, pushed them great. But anyway, Prime series amp, 4-channel 300 watt amp. That's what I got pushing all the mids in here. They work great. Wiring is pretty much the same. Ground or power wire going to the front. 4-gauge wire, by the way, for this. And this is OFC wire too, not CCA. Ground wire. Now, getting over here to this is when I put this big amp in, I wanted to make sure that all my electrical and wires were sufficient. Plenty of ground and all that, which is why I use this big cable. Now what we got here, this is just like a little, I made this kind of like a little mini block, junction block, or however you want to call it. And all it is just a ground block where all of my grounds connect here. Now what I got going on is obviously the ground from here goes to that amp. Here's the ground going to there. But this wire, I have it grounded to the frame right up under here. It grounds to the frame of the Jeep itself, and then this, or the chassis frame. This wire, this ground wire, and it's also the same as this 0-gauge. It actually goes, and I'm going to hop out and show you, because I actually have this going to the actual frame of the Jeep, and I'll show you in just a second. I'm going to hop out and run around. Just get out. And I'll show you what I got going on up under here. So, if you can see, it comes out. Comes out there, and then goes right to here, goes through, and I actually have it to the actual frame here. Now I painted over this. Obviously you want to make sure that you have take a grinder, grind the frame so it's complete bare metal, and also with your copper, with your lug here, make sure it's all clean. But I just put some paint over it so it didn't rust anywhere. But it's completely the bare copper lug to the actual frame. So I have 2 grounding points that go up, and in a few minutes I'm going to go around to the front and show you what's going on. But anyway, that runs big ground wire going right to the frame. The other one, like we've seen, goes to the chassis, or the whatever you call it. The point is I wanted to have make sure that, you know, your grounding is very important when it comes to car audio. You got to make sure you have good grounds. A lot of people will go into bolts like this or like this, seatbelt bolts, or any other places, you know, something like that. And I'm not saying that wouldn't work, but have plenty. You're not going to go, you're not going to have too many grounding points when it comes to car audio. You're not going to have too many grounds. So you can always overdo it and you'll be okay. Probably overdid it a lot here. And there are ways to you can test how good your grounds are with a multimeter. There are other videos online for that. I may do something like that later. But anyway, the point is, this is kind of what I come up with. This was the easiest way to run my grounds without having to run wire from here all the way up the front to your battery. I thought this would be the better way to do it. So ground to here, also ground like we just seen to the frame, goes into your amps. And then of course all of this, you know, your RCA and all this stuff. This eventually, when I first put this in, some of this is CCA wire, but it's 12 gauge CCA. So I don't see that being a problem for just basically what it amounts to 75 watts a channel. Yeah, OFC wire is better than CCA as far as, you know, needing, especially when it comes to your bigger stuff. But with this, I don't think it's that much of a problem. The only reason I would do it different eventually is just to have it kind of all the same wire. But that's all 12 gauge CCA wire. It's not really going to be a problem for this. Since I was redoing this, I just went ahead and went with, by the way, I got this from New Concepts. New Concepts does have pretty good wire. They also have good, you know, any of their wire is pretty good. It's all OFC wire. So I did do that. I did get 10 gauge wire for here. Looking around back here, I think that's about it for back here and everything. I'm not really going over too many settings and all. I mean, you know, it's settings are going to vary basically. I mean, it's a monoblock amp. All of my gains, I will say this, that my gains are set with a DD1 distortion detector. I highly recommend it. It's expensive, but it is kind of a must to make sure your gains are set properly, because that's another big thing that people do wrong with their amplifiers, is they don't set their gains properly, or try to set it with a multimeter, or just try to listen to it. You really need to get the DD1 distortion detector. Highly recommend it, even if it's, you know, you're not going to get many uses out of it, but it's very important to set your gains. A gain is not a volume knob, so just keep that in mind. I think that's about it for back here. I'm going to go up under the hood and just show you what we got up under there as far as the electrical. And my cat decided she wanted to come be in the video for a minute. All right, so I'll just start right here at the battery. AGM battery. Right here, this is the 4 gauge wire going to the 300 watt amp. Make sure you do fuse. Also keep the fuse as close as you can to the terminal. So anyway, 4 gauge wire runs back to the amplifier. Over here on this side, right here, this runs to the alternator. This wire is actually 2-aught wire. I bought this a while back when I'd first done my big 3. I think I'd done a video about it. You might have to go back and look through my videos. Pretty sure I'd done one on it, but this is actually 2 gauge welding cable. So that runs here on around. I done a video not long ago about putting, this is a Mekman 240 amp alternator. With a system that big, the stock alternator is like, if I remember, 160 amp. So I went with the 240 upgrade, but I have the 2-aught cable going from here as part of your big three, going from here to the battery. Right here is the 0-gauge 1-aught. This runs to the 1500 watt amp. I have it running just directly off the alternator from here into a fuse block. And then this wraps around and goes through back to the amp. 1-aught, plenty big enough. And of course it's fused here. I've heard, when I first did this video, people, it seems like there were comments about why this is not fused. Yes. Should it be fused? Yes. Is it a good idea to fuse everything? Yes. But in this instance, with the way this is run, I did not fuse it. I didn't fuse this. I guess I would just recommend that every wire has a fuse. I did not do this for this particular setup. I didn't do it. Now with the ground side, again, like I was mentioning about all my grounds, whoops, sorry, that's jump over down here. Again, when I said it a few minutes ago, you can't have too many grounds, and I need to get something a little bit better for this because I've got all these stacked up. But you've got some of your normal grounds that goes to the vehicle. Let me see. Here is the ground, this big one. Goes down, it grounds to the alternator, right down there. Have that run. Where the ground wire in the back that runs to the frame, right here from the ground from the battery, this, I think it's this one, this wire runs to the frame right there. That's how the ground in the back grounds up here. It just runs through the frame, through here, and up to the battery. Instead of running instead of running a wire all the way down, this was easier to do. Also, this ground here, as some of this is part of the big three, this ground here runs to the, I want to say the engine block. I think that runs to the engine block. This runs to the frame, alternator, and I think these are your regular grounds for the vehicle. I don't know, I can't remember exactly where they run. You can't have too many grounds with this, like I said, especially with a system like this where you're getting up into 2,000 watt range. Probably good to upgrade your alternator, and you want to make sure you've got plenty of electrical, plenty big enough grounds, and enough of them. You're not gonna overdo your grounds. You're not gonna have too many grounds. Well, I guess you could, but for practical purposes like this, these grounds are more than fine. And I think that's about it. I mean, this video is running on about 20 minutes, probably longer than but I wanted to be a little bit, I didn't want to just run through this. I wanted to be a little bit specific on what, on how I had everything and why. Because, you know, you got to make sure you can't, people want to skimp on their electrical a lot of times, and it's really not a good idea to have a, you know, if you got a little 500 watt amplifier power and something, or a, you know, A lot of times your stock electrical is fine. Stock alternators are usually fine. But in this Jeep, with what we were doing, because we're probably above 2,000 watts, I just went ahead and made sure I had all of these upgrades. So you don't want to be bottlenecked by your electrical. And so I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I think that covers pretty much everything. As far as the electrical, like I say, I did do a video on installing this Mechman alternator. So if you'd like, check it out. The fuse block, I guess I'll just say the fuse block was just a little cheap one I bought off Amazon. I think the fuse I think it's a 200 amp fuse. Yeah, I think that's what it says. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think that's going to wind it up for this one. So thank you for watching, and please check out my other videos.